Nahash, Steelshod. Alejandra rides out with her several hundred mercenaries, striking north to sandwich the Sephardic cavalry between her forces and the spear lines. Duke Diaz's men, his army from Septimania, follows his command. Rodrigo Diaz is renowned as one of the best generals and warlords in Spitalia. He's conquered several neighboring city-states, he pays and trains his men very well, and he is a fearless leader. This engagement is no different, despite the massive forces arrayed against him. Rodrigo and his personal elites are mounted, but most of the men are on foot. They form up in front of the supply tents, advancing on Bjornsson's flank slowly. They absorb the impact of the first massed charge without issue, their lines hardening to withstand it. Duke Diaz is clever as well as fearless, and he has formed his men up inside the edge of the Sephardic camp. They are utilizing the trenches and stakes that were dug out around the camp's perimeter, using the crude defenses against the Sephards, and Halvar the peacekeeper, given command by Bjornsson, is not the type of commander to spend the lives of his men needlessly. He pulls his men back, preparing for an organized, concentrated assault. From his vantage, Jaspar sees the entire battle unfolding. Brother Enoch has had to take the majority of his men north to help the Ruskins deal with the Bearsarks. The remaining 1,000 or so Serpentes, led by brothers Khalid and Torthian, do what they can to harass Bjornsson's reserve forces. They are hard-pressed, and Jaspar directs the Balliste to support them. This battle is at the edge of the ballista's maximum range, and most of the bolts do little or no damage. But a lucky few have an impact, and the simple fact that the Swards know the Balliste are pointed at them gives them pause, makes them less enthusiastic about charging the Serpentes ranks. Meanwhile, the main battle rages on. Leona has found her way to Dagrun. The huge woman has smashed a hole in the front ranks, a dozen conscripts and Tarathian militia dying on the blood-slight battlefield around her. Only a few of Steelshod's infantry are still at hand to join Leona in dealing with this gap. She has Miles and Pierre close behind her. Dagrun has her own entourage, several of her closest Bearsarks. Pierre takes up a position and shouts for the Tarathian spearmen to form a goddamned line. They manage to decipher his words through his Lorinet accent, and he scares a dozen of them into position. Miles leads by example, spreading out from Leona's flank and directly engaging the largest Bearsark, standing to Dagrun's right. Miles is tall and broad. The Bearsark is taller, broader. Of course, Miles bears Olaf's steel battle-axe. The Bearsark's axe is iron, but so much bigger. Miles has felt the cold, deadly fury of battle come upon him. Bearsarks know nothing but battle fury. The Bearsark rages his huge axe. By all rights, the farm boy should be torn to shreds. But he has something the Bearsark lacks. The courage of righteous conviction, the knowledge that he is fighting for common folk, farmers and tanners and cooks like the ones back home. He has heart, far more than the Bearsark has, fighting in this foreign land for someone else's vengeance. He also has a shield. That might be even more helpful than heart, come to think of it. He catches the Bearsark's downswing on an angle, diverting it away, counters with a powerful chop to the Bearsark's left arm, overextended from his swing. The Bearsark screams in pain and fury. The arm goes slack. That evens the fight a little. Leona probes Dagrun's defenses, jabbing the Bearsark's shield with her spear, keeping her own hoplon raised. Dagrun stabs back at her, her spear giving her longer reach. Leona stays light on her feet, dodging side to side as much as blocking. "That skin you wear," Dagrun says, her middish thick with a Sephardic accent. "What are you?" As she talks, Dagrun keeps poking at her, and it soon becomes clear that the huge woman is nowhere near as agile as Leona. Leona darts in, gets in a good stab at the Bearsark's leg, dodges back out. "I am Leona Leonskar," she says. "You don't have Leonskars in Svarden?" Dagrun grunts in pain. "Leonskar," she mutters. "How you did this? Blasphemy! Desecration of Tares!" Blah, blah, blah. Leona counters words and actions simultaneously, speaking as she blocks a vicious thrust, slashes the tip of her spear across Dagrun's arm. "Take it up with Drangi." "Drangi?" Dagrun says, recognizing the name as Svardic, if not the individual. Who is? A traitor? Leona just grins. She has a mouth on her at times, but often when fighting, she's content to just focus on the battle. And what an odd little battle it is. Leona darts around the Bearsark, trusting Pierre and the Tarathians to keep most of the other Bearsarks off her back. She jabs and stabs at the right moments, deflecting most attacks upon her. This is Leona in her element, fighting defensively, whittling her foe down with relatively small but reliable hits, taking very few in kind. One misstep and it all changes. Dagrun can't match Leona defensively, but she hits so fucking hard. Dagrun's spear slams into Leona's chest, not piercing the mail but knocking the wind out of her and staggering her back. Dagrun strikes again, pressing her advantage. Miles finishes his Bearsark, tries to intervene, but another of Dagrun's men steps up to distract him. Dagrun staggers Leona with a shield bash, going to ram her spear home, and an arrow whistles through the air, piercing the white bear Bearsark in her shoulder. She grunts in pain, staggered long enough for Leona to regain her footing. Across the battle, several ranks deep, Drengi howls in triumph at the shot, raises a fist in salute to Leona. That's Drengi, Leona points out as she resumes her rapid, harassing attacks on Dagrun. Elsewhere, Gjul is getting pressed hard by the furious, axe-wielding women. Gwyneth and Zelda hammer him, denting his plate, slicing his flesh, keeping him off balance. Bear and the Sons of Victory that still stand have boxed the Bearsarks in. Perrin directed dozens of men to overwhelm the Bearsarks and reformed his lines towards the front. Gjul is running out of options, and every time he tries to grab one of the women to grapple them down, they batter him even harder. Doom! The word echoes across the battlefield, but like most effects, it is most concentrated at its focal point. Perrin's lines, and the sons behind them. Perrin barely keeps his footing, but most of his conscripts simply collapse at the sound of the word. Many of the Svards in Krigar's fighting do the same. Unferth arises from the crowd, walks over his own cowering men, crushing them and Tarathians alike under his heavy boots. Zelda has been staggered by the doom, though Gwyneth and Gjul still struggle. Unslings his shield and draws his sword. He moves to engage. He wears heavy steel plate, courtesy of Alexander, and unlike some of his allies, he knows he can't defeat Unferth. So he doesn't try. He just wants to get in his way. Unferth goes to bat the fool aside with his poleaxe, a contemptuous swing. Perrin raises his shield and deflects the blow. Unferth strikes again, this time connecting, glancing off the angled steel breastplate. Perrin stays on the defensive, barely attacking at all, just trying to buy his men time to regroup from the doom. Gjul, significantly injured now, manages to slither away from Gwyneth's onslaught. He turns and flees, ripping apart any Tarathian conscripts that get in his way, retreating back towards the Svardic lines. The eastern battle is in disarray, as both Tarathian and Svard alike struggle to regain their composure after Unferth's assault. Tebjonsen sees this, frowns. Unferth is useful, but his reckless disregard for both sides may have finally become more of a liability than he had anticipated with these new powers of his. Leona also sees it. She loses interest in her fight with Dagrun. It's lasting too long. She goes on the offensive, trying to finish it quickly. It's a risky maneuver, one that might not have paid off, save for one fact. Steelshod's cavalry have returned from the western battlefield. As Dagrun roars at Leona, presses her own attack, she suddenly sprouts several arrows out of her back and left side. The Manticore and the Unicorn charge into the fray. Dagrun screams in pain, turns to face them, takes the full force of a Lorinet horseman's flail to the face. Leona decides that her measure of whether the white lion or a white bear is ultimately superior will have to wait. All this proves is a fact everybody already knew. Steelshod teamwork beats Svardic prowess every time. She shifts out of the melee with Dagrun and begins picking her way through the crowds to get to Unferth. As she turns, she finds Olivenko emerging from the rearguard, falling into step beside her. Their eyes meet, exchange a simple nod of understanding. Dagrun, meanwhile, is beset on all sides. After their shots, Steelshod's cavalry switched to melee. She is now stuck between Miles and the infantry on one side, and Leon, Gerald, and Evan on the other. Pierre and the spearmen he's co-opted surge forward to keep the other Berserks from backing their commander up. Levin and Anatoly break off from the other cavalry, joining Alexander a little further down the line. The fighting is thick here, but it's mostly massed Svards and Krigars. Alexander has pushed to the front lines, leading his men by example. Oliver close behind with the banner, rearing his horse and stabbing with his spear whenever he sees an opening. Anatoly keeps his bow in hand, skirting around the masses of troops, shooting at exposed backs and sides. Levin rakes the flanks of the Svardic lines with his sword, fighting his way to Alexander's side. When he arrives, Alexander says, "Levin, glad for the help." Levin just grunts in affirmative. They both see Bjornsson pushing his way towards the front line, heading for Alexander, and clearing a path in front of him is the steel-clad Berserk Tarvald. Tarvald wears heavy steel plate and bears a long steel sword, all crafted by his master, the Frost Berserk Aleifir. When he reaches the first Tarathian soldiers, he starts sweeping through them. Blood and limbs fly, and Alexander rushes forward to meet him. Alexander charges the Berserk, shouting his battle cry, and smashes into him with a good fierce hit, denting the steel plate, staggering Tarvald, but not stopping him. Tarvald returns in kind, striking back. Alexander goes to parry the blow, but underestimates it. The shock of the hit nearly makes him lose his grip. Though Alexander is mounted and Tarvald is on foot, they are nearly the same height. They exchange a flurry of sword strokes, each drawing the other's blood. A misstep nearly ends the fight. Dasha steps onto a corpse, loses his footing, and jostles Alexander. Torvald presses the attack, smashing Alexander with a series of sword blows that stagger him and nearly drive him out of the saddle. Behind him, Bjornsson shouts for him to stand down, but a Berserk battle-lust is upon Tarvald, and he does not heed the Jarl. Tarvald raises his sword to strike, and finds a spear rammed into his face. Oliver rides into the fray, nudging Dasha and Alexander back to safety, shouting curses at the huge Berserk. Tarvald is only lightly injured from the strike, and he lets out a deep, booming laugh at the small, crippled Tarathian boy. He swings his sword in a lazy blow, expecting to bisect the lad. Oliver ducks in the saddle, avoiding the blow entirely. Angry, Tarvald swings again, and Oliver shuffles his horse back a few steps. Tarvald presses the attack, but as he does, he's suddenly buffeted back and forth as hits come from his flanks. Anatoly and Levin have joined the fray, hammering Tarvald with spear and sword. Alexander catches his breath and pulls Oliver back. It's the second time in this war that the crippled lad has saved his life. Alexander raises his sword in salute to Oliver, then charges back into the fight with Tarvald. The sun beats high overhead. The fight has raged on for some time now, and behind the battle, to the south, a new series of horn blasts echo across the field. Bjornsson, still pushing his way to Alexander, looks over his shoulder and curses. 5,000 Castellines array themselves to the south, and the cowardly remnants of the Castellines that have served with the Svards are rushing to join them. Not meet them in the battle, join them. In a stroke, Bjornsson has lost 4,000 troops and gained nearly 10,000 enemies, all of which are now assembled to assault the rear of his main host. He looks to Sakapis, riding near him for an answer, but the aging strategist has paled. "The Praetorian," he rasps, looking at these newcomers. "Why has the Praetorian come against us? Lavinius has betrayed us." Bjornsson snarls. "Worthless." He looks back to the walls of Nahash, the damnable pillar rising into the sky, and the banner of Steelshod flapping above its commander. He doesn't know if his army will survive this fight, not with enough men to taste down the rest of the Serpentes. But he will see the heart of Nahash crushed, and he will see Steelshod's commander crushed with it. Thank you for tuning in to Steelshod, a series by Mostly Rights, narrated by Tailforge. You can find every chapter in text format, as well as character sheets, setting information, maps, and rule documents on the Steelshod tabletop system in the link below. If you'd like to support the channel, you can pop down to the description and use the Patreon link for recurring donations, the paypal.me link for one-time donations, the Teespring link for shirts with the incredibly cool background art by Nobody, or use the DriveThruRPG affiliate link the next time you're looking to try a new system. If you'd like to support the author, you can find Steelshod merch on the MostlyRights.com store, or donate to the Mostly Rights Patreon, which are both linked on reddit.com/r/mostlyrights down below.